And what did you find underneath the water when you did your underwater pieces?
Well, I've said before, and I think it's an interesting point. It's a free space, and nobody can interfere with you. Talking about being private, it's not a performance either.
Yes.
But it's a free space that nobody really owns in the sense that they use it. You know, maybe fishermen, but and it's so exciting. And also, it's very chance because like fish are going by, and you know, it's never the same 2 minutes in a row. So I just was fascinated by that idea.
What did you find there?
Well, I put things there. I didn't really find it. I mean, I put calabashes strung together, and I used the sandbags to make an underground dam, underwater dam, where of course that was very surrealistic. They were all very. There is a certain surrealism in my work, by the way, of course. And it's a story about Dorothy Iannone.
I don't know.
Do you know her?
No.
She used to live with Dieter Roth. Well, there's a long story about her because when I started out in New York in the early 60s, let's see, how did that happen? I was friends with Peter Moore when I worked at the UN as a typist, and he used to sit next to me and work. And one day I said to him, "What are you going to do when you grow up?" And he laughed. He said, "I'm going to be a famous photographer." He said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to be a famous artist." And we both laughed. Then he got married, and I got very friendly with them. But Peter's mother was a garden writer for the New York Times. And so I had this idea to write an article about the witch hazel in Central Park, whether it was a native there or whether it had been introduced. So I did a lot of research, and I had it published. I was very happy with that in the Times. And because of that, a millionaire called James Upham asked me to do a garden, an Indian garden in his house. And he was, at the time, was married to Dorothy Iannone. And then so Dorothy opened a gallery called the Strike Gallery, and that was my first show in New York. And then Dorothy ran away with Dieter Roth. So then I went to see her in Dusseldorf, where she lived for a time. And one day she said to me, "Peter, I have a show in the Eat Art Gallery. Would you like to see it?" And I said, "Well, yes, but it's night." She said, "Oh, it doesn't matter because the lights are on." So we went to look at the show. I looked through the window, and she had her boxes with these naked figures on them and a hole in each box. So I said, "What's the hole about?" She said, "Well, you put your hand in there, and there's a switch, and music comes on." So I said, "That sounds very nice, but Dorothy, what's it got to do with Eat Art?" And she said, "After dinner music." And that's the story I wrote. There were no artists in my family, except I had an aunt who was on the stage. She was quite well known. So I went to the University of Illinois from England, in America, and I studied agriculture for one semester. And that first Christmas, I decided to hitchhike down to New Orleans with very little money. And so I hitchhiked there, and my last day at New Orleans, I ran into this, I would call him a street person, really. And I bought him some beans for 10 cents, and he was so impressed that he went into a bar and he came out and gave me a painting. It was an abstract expressionist painting. I didn't realize he had stolen it. I looked at that painting and I said to myself, "This is what I want to do."
What's the difference between nature and art when you say nature is art?
Well, there is nature, of course, and there's man-made nature, as in this garden here. In a way, this is a kind of art. So as you know, in my work, I use geographical different geographical locations in my art to bring it together, so that it's not ever one view. That some people look at my work and they say, "Where did you take this photograph?" And I say, "Everywhere and nowhere."
Can you try to figure out your position in the art world, maybe in relation to Joseph Beuys, maybe in relation to Robert Smithson, maybe in relation to Lothar Baumgarten?
Well, Lothar, though I've met him, I really don't know his work very well. I think Dennis Hoppenheim would be a good one.
Yes.
In fact, when I was homeless, I was actually sleeping on the couch in Dennis's apartment in Brooklyn for a while. And also we were together with his family in Aspen. And so, you know, we were interested in these things together. Actually, I really learned Super 8 film from him. Because he did a lot of that.
He did it together with Gary Schum, for example, as well. After your decision to be a painter or to be an artist, what did you do in that time? After the first, I don't know. Yes.
Well,
your decision
I studied.
to change.
I studied for 7 years to get my Bachelor of Art degree in painting. But in between 2 years, I had to leave work because I had no more money. Then I went back and finished. By 1960, I got my degree. And then I went to Rome for 6 months and painted.
When was it?
1960.
1961.
And so I went to Rome, and funnily enough, talking about language, I taught in the Berlitz. I taught English in Berlitz to help support myself. While I was painting, you know, in the studio in the evenings.
In Rome?
In Rome, yes.
Could you describe the paintings you did in that time?
Well, yes, they were abstract expressionists. Is how I finished college doing abstract expressionist work, and it was at probably the end of the abstract expressionist movement. But I was very impressed with people like de Kooning but I got over that, and then pop art came along, and I didn't do that. I thought I don't dislike it, but I just thought it's not for me. And then I did some geometric painting after that, and then I think hit my stride in conceptual work, which came along around the end of the 60s.
Do you see a relationship or a neighborhood between the beginning in painting by Mark Rothko and Barnett Newman? It was really, yes, it was connected to the nature, it was connected to a surrealistic view into nature, and then it became really abstract, and your way and your interest in nature and start abstract expressionism and then coming back to nature?
Well, I was aware of Rothko, but I didn't really think of it that way at all. I think what I liked about the abstract expressionists, Mathieu especially, the French one, was their, what I thought of, it was non-mannerist, and like my thrown ropes, a non-mannerist. It's an attempt to do something that isn't so deliberate, to give some freedom.
What does it mean in that way, mannerist?
Mannerist, I said, well, to me it means it's very planned, and I don't know how else to say it. It's very deliberate and very planned. Yes. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just that I was trying to get away from that. And I always thought a lot about John Cage. And I always said that John Cage, I thought, was, how did I put it, was selected chance. But somebody said to me, well, if you think that, you don't understand John Cage. But that doesn't really matter, because if that's what I got from his work, because I think work can exist beyond the person who does it. You know, it has a life of its own, and it can influence people in some ways that the artist would never dream.
So the understanding of what an artist is more or less to have a frame and to put the frame, for example, here, and what do you look, what you can see into the frame is, by definition, a piece of art by the man who is holding the frame.
Yes. Well, except I don't do single photographs, of course.
Yes, I know.
Yes,
I know.
which is a big difference.
But the way
Yes.
with John Cage, music is outside.
Yes.
Here's the traffic, for example.
Oh yes, right. Yes.
Or look into the frame.
Yes. Well, what I had to tell you a rather amusing story. I was at a performance by John Cage, and I was sitting with Tini Duchamp, and the performance, part of the performance was a woman playing the piano, of which John Cage had made every note have no relation to the next note. And it was a very, very difficult piece to play. But in the middle of the performance, Tini leant over to me and she said, "I think John was playing a joke on that woman." And he probably, not particularly that woman, but whoever played it, you know.
But that's the old question. Is the music noted in the notes or in the space in between?
Interesting. Yes. I have no idea.
But I think that's really, you know, you have that plant here and you have that plant here.
Yes.
There's no connection in between. But if you take a view on, there's a connection.
Yes.
So the connection is more or less made. It's human made, and then it can be an artwork.
Yes.
When did you start with your photo works, I would say?
I'd say at 69, 70. No, actually, in 70, when I did my volcano, Paracutin volcano,
Yes.
Time magazine lent me a camera. I didn't even have one. But on that expedition, I did buy a little camera, so that was the first one I really had. My first pieces in 69, frankly, were from slides from the Museum of Natural History.
So it was 40 years old at that time, is this right?
Yes.
And that time,
39 when my first show.
Yes.
I was going to kill myself if I didn't make it by 40, so it was just in time.
Perfect, perfect. You talked about, or you named it out, throne robes. It's a huge body of work you did.
Yeah.
And when we realized the piece together in Rolandseck in Remagen, it's 8 years ago now, 2001.
Yes.
Yeah, 2001. We had a big discussion with the people around, and nobody understood more or less why you can do a rope and you throw it on the ground, and then you plant little flowers inside and stones and this one. And I said to the people, you know, if you do go to a cemetery, everybody is lying in a line. And if you take a look into the garden in front of your house, everything is more or less clear, rectangle. And if you do go in a wood, you can't find the rectangle.
Somebody said straight lines don't occur in nature.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And in fact, in my garden, I try not to have it. The borders all straight. It's
Yes.
not quite. It's very difficult to avoid it completely, but it's much more interesting when it's curved.
So there's Mondrian on the one hand side, Matisse on the other hand side, and you are totally right on the Matisse side. Is it true?
Yes, yes. Or
It's-
could we say in the middle? No, I don't think you're quite in the middle.
Do you see a relation between the way of painting by Mathieu and your way of throwing the rope?
Not really. I don't think so.
But it is more or less an action painting.
Yes. I only had one experience with Mathieu that I could mention, because when I was at college, they invited him to do a piece.
Yes.
And so he had a 50-foot canvas covered with gold leaf. Then he had a bucket of yellow paint and a broom, and he put on roller skates, and he dipped the thing in it, and he just roller skated down there, making this wonderful line. And all the teachers in the university hated it, and I loved it.